They listed my house for sale, without asking, without warning, and without even owning it. I'm on a construction site when my neighbor Dolores sends me a photo that makes my stomach drop. Strangers in suits are pacing my grandfather's cabin, deck with tape measures, while a realtor in designer heels stands in my driveway, gesturing at the property like she's already spending her commission. The bitter scent of spilled coffee clings to my truck cab as my hands tremble, staring at these vultures circling what has always been my family's refuge. I can practically taste the metallic burn of rage when HOA President Veronica Ashworth's smug voicemail plays in my ear. Just exploring some community improvement options, Garrett. You understand? No, Veronica. I don't understand how you think you can sell what doesn't belong to you. But here's what I do understand. How to fight back. What would you do if strangers were parading through your property like it was already theirs? And tell me, where are you watching from? Please say this kind of HOA madness isn't unique to my town. Let me rewind and explain how we got here. My name's Garrett, and that cabin they're trying to steal has been in my family for 43 years. My grandfather Fletcher bought those 2 acres in 1981 with money from his Korean War disability checks. He came home with shrapnel in his leg and nightmares that never left him, but he found peace by that little lake. He built the cabin himself, board by board, nail by nail, plumbing still solid after decades. Every summer when I helped him stain the deck, he'd say, "This is our forever home, Garrett. Nobody can take away what you build with your own sweat." The smell of pine sap would cling to our fingers for days. Fletcher passed 3 years ago, leaving me the cabin and all the memories packed into its beams. It's where my daughter Mackenzie, she's 16, escapes when her mom and I clash, which is often since the divorce. It's where I go on weekends to remember what quiet feels like after 60-hour construction, weeks full of drills and foremen barking orders. That cabin stood long before the HOA, 30 years before, to be exact. The deed proves it clear as day, predating these suburban soldiers who decided everyone needs matching mailboxes. Enter Veronica Ashworth, HOA president, professional thorn in everyone's side. She rolled in from California 2 years back, polishes her white BMW twice a week, and decided our small community needed improvements. Translation: get rid of anyone who doesn't own a luxury car. Her manicured nails are pointers for violations. She tosses around legal jargon to intimidate neighbors who never set foot in a law school. I've literally watched her measure people's lawns with a 12-inch wooden ruler, like we're all in grade school. Her first attack on me came 6 months ago, a citation against my grandfather's workshop. Non-conforming rustic structure, she called it. Apparently hand-built craftsmanship doesn't suit her aesthetic standards. She demanded 15 grand in compliance fees or a full rebuild to match her suburban utopia. When I told her plainly what she could do with her compliance fees in language Fletcher himself would have used, she escalated to today's real estate circus, the realtor snooping around. Veronica's old sorority sister from USC. The brochures describe my family's retreat as a prime development lot with tear-down potential for modern lakefront amenities. They were literally talking about demolishing my grandfather's workshop to put up a yoga studio. Here's what makes my jaw lock. They have no legal ground, none. This is pure intimidation, an attempt to scare me into selling cheap so Veronica can flip it to developers for 10 times what I'd get. But it isn't just about money. That cabin is my last solid tie to my grandfather. It's where Mackenzie feels safe when life gets overwhelming. It's my own refuge from a world where job sites push speed over quality. Every hand-carved porch railing tells the story of a man who built things the right way. The loons calling across the water each evening, that's the peace Fletcher fought to protect. The smell of coffee in his old percolator still fills the kitchen every Saturday morning, and now Veronica wants to erase all of that. For what? Property values, uniformity. Other neighbors are starting to glance over their shoulders, wondering if they'll be the next target on her list. Poor Mrs. Patterson got slapped with a violation because her rose garden was too colorful. The Hendricks family, they're bleeding money with daily fines just for parking their work truck in their own driveway. The whole neighborhood is on edge, waiting to see if ordinary people can still live in the homes they've loved for decades, or if cash and legal intimidation always win out. But Veronica picked the wrong family this time. My grandfather didn't. Crawl out of frozen foxholes in Korea just so some HOA tyrant could rob him of his legacy. Now it's time to remind her what Fletcher's grandson knows about fighting back. Her next strike landed exactly 1 week after the realtor showdown. A so-called formal notice printed on fake legal letterhead that would have made a real attorney cry with laughter. Notice of abandoned property statute violation, it bellowed in bold type. According to Veronica's wildly twisted version of property law, the fact that I only used the cabin on weekends meant it was abandoned under Municipal Code 847.3b. She claimed she'd start racking up $500 fines every single day in 30 days unless I either moved in full-time or signed over the deed for community use. The smell of fresh toner from her high-end printer couldn't disguise the stench of pure nonsense. To drive the threat home, she copied the letter to County Commissioner Bradley Walsh, her country club tennis buddy. The message was obvious. I've got connections. You don't. Better give up now. What Veronica didn't understand is that construction workers are problem solvers by trade. When a foundation cracks, we don't panic. We dig until we find the root cause. So I spent my lunch break in the county clerk's office, a damp basement that reeked of stale coffee and lost dreams. Beverly, the clerk, had seen every shady property scheme in the book. She pulled records going all the way back to when this whole area was nothing but cornfields and fishing holes. Your grandfather was sharp, Beverly said, her weathered hands sliding across the original survey maps. Take a look at this. My heart thudded as she revealed Fletcher's 1981 survey. Turns out our property stretched 50 feet farther north than anyone realized, including Veronica. That fancy HOA mailbox cluster she loved so much, sitting right in the middle of my grandfather's land, and the real kicker? The deed carried, a clause I'd completely overlooked. Grandfathered property rights in perpetuity with all municipal exemptions intact. Translation in plain English: this land belongs to the Fletcher family forever, and no HOA, especially one that didn't even exist when it was purchased, can alter that. I'd seen contractors saved by ancient building permits they thought were long gone. Same rule applies to property deeds. Never assume you're stuck until you've checked 3 separate records. But the real shock came later that night from my neighbor, Dolores. She showed up at my door with a plate of oatmeal cookies and information that nearly knocked me flat. That Ashworth woman offered me $500, Dolores whispered, eyes darting like we were conspiring a heist. Wanted me to spy on you, take photos of your truck, your boat, anything she could twist into a violation. She handed me a handwritten list that made my blood boil. The Morrison family, hounded until they sold, all over a fence that didn't meet code. The Patterson cottage, under siege because of a few too many garden gnomes. The Hendricks family, getting fined day after day for parking their work truck in their own driveway. She's not just after you, Garrett, Dolores said, as we crunched over fallen leaves along my property line. She wants to push out anyone who doesn't drive a BMW. Then came the real bombshell. Dolores leaned in with a knowing smile. I've been documenting everything, photos, recordings, copies of her threatening letters. 30 years as a high school principal taught me how to deal with bullies, and she's the worst I've seen. This sweet 70-year-old retired teacher had been quietly running a one-woman surveillance operation for months. She had proof of systematic harassment, discriminatory targeting, and what looked like a deliberate scheme to force families out. And then Dolores's grin widened. You'll like this part, she said. I did some digging of my own. Turns out your HOA president isn't exactly who she pretends to be. Veronica Ashworth, the woman terrorizing this neighborhood with her bogus legal threats. Her law license in California had been pulled after she mishandled her clients' trust accounts. That picture-perfect suburban life she flaunted, it was balanced on overdrawn credit cards and a mortgage already 3 months overdue. She wasn't some powerful attorney, just a cornered fraud relying on scare tactics because she had nothing else to fall back on. That same night, I installed cameras around every inch of my property. Motion sensing, night vision, heavy duty. Models, the same kind we use on job sites to catch people stealing equipment. If Veronica wanted to play the surveillance game, I'd outmatch her with professional gear. I also reached out to Tom Martinez, a local lawyer known for specializing in property disputes and for despising HOA bullies. After hearing my story, he said, "Bring me everything, those bogus legal letters, the survey papers, your neighbors. Evidence. This woman just picked the wrong fight." My crew didn't hesitate to back me up. In construction, blue-collar loyalty runs deep when someone tries to push one of us around. Even Mackenzie got involved, helping me sort through the paperwork. And asking sharp little questions like, "Dad, is it against the law to lie in an official letter?" Smart kid. She already sensed this wasn't just about saving our cabin, it was about standing up for everyone Veronica had gone after. That evening, the pine needles filled the air with their clean scent as I sat on Grandpa's porch reviewing our stack of evidence. For the first time in months, I felt something I hadn't touched since this whole ordeal began. Confidence. Veronica thought she was running a chess match while I was stuck playing checkers. She was about to find out that construction guys can play chess too. 2 weeks after I stumbled across those courthouse records, Veronica made her next move. And this time, she didn't come alone. I was swapping out rotted deck boards on the cabin when a white county truck rolled into the driveway. Out stepped Harold Wessler, the code enforcement officer, clipboard in hand, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. And right behind him came Veronica, wrapped in her power suit-like armor, wearing that smug grin that always made my jaw tighten. "Mr. Fletcher," Harold began, reading stiffly from prepared notes, "we've received complaints about unpermitted structures on this property. Specifically, that workshop appears to be out of compliance with current building codes and may require immediate remediation. That workshop, my grandfather's pride, he built it himself in 1983. Solid as stone, sturdier than half the McMansions thrown up in the neighborhood." "What sort of remediation are we talking about?" I asked, already knowing this was another shakedown attempt. Veronica stepped forward, clearly savoring the moment. $25,000 in permits and updates to meet code or demolition. Within 30 days. The structure doesn't meet modern safety standards. The acrid bite of Harold's cigarette smoke mixed with the sweet punch of Veronica's perfume, turning the crisp morning air sour. Anger burned at the back of my throat. But here's the thing about working construction for 15 years. You learn to stay calm when people create fake emergencies to trap you. Instead of losing it, I pulled out my phone and started recording. "Harold," I said evenly, "can you show me exactly which codes this 40-year-old workshop is supposedly breaking?" Harold shifted uneasily and glanced at Veronica. "Well, there's no permit on file in the current system. Because the county lost records during the 2019 system changeover," I countered, "but I'll bet the original contractor still has copies." For the first time, Veronica's confident smile slipped. She hadn't expected me to be prepared. That afternoon, I started calling contractors who had worked in the area during the early 80s. On the third call, I struck gold. Jimmy Kowalski, 74 years old, retired, but sharp as ever. "Fletcher Cabin? Hell yes, I remember that job," he laughed. "Your grandfather was a perfectionist. Made me redo the foundation twice because one corner was off by half. An inch. That workshop was built to outlast a hurricane, and Jimmy still had the paperwork, original permit, inspection reports, and signed approvals, all stashed away in a filing cabinet in his basement since 1983. Everything, Veronica swore didn't exist. Sometimes the best weapon against bureaucratic bullies is simply better paperwork, and old contractors never toss out their files. But the real eye-opener came later that night when Harold phoned me, his voice low like he didn't want anyone overhearing. "Garrett, I need to tell you something off the record," he said. "Those violations I cited today, they're questionable at best. Mrs. Ashworth has been leaning on me to dig up problems with certain properties." Harold was facing re-election next year. Veronica had been donating to his campaign, hosting fundraisers, but her support came with strings attached. "I can't say this officially," Harold went on, "but if you file a harassment complaint, I'll back you up. This isn't how code enforcement is supposed to work." The very next morning, I got the kind of surprise I enjoy most: fresh footage from my security cameras. At exactly 12:47 a.m., clear as day in infrared, Veronica crept onto my property carrying a bag of decorative flower pots. I watched her work, carefully lining them up where she believed the property line ran, then pulling out a tape measure to mark the spots exactly. Her scheme was obvious: sneak unauthorized decorations onto my land, photograph them later as proof of a boundary violation, and then spin it into another round of harassment. But my grandfather's old survey proved those flower pots were sitting 15 feet inside my property. Veronica wasn't just trespassing. She was staging evidence. The camera housing felt cold and smooth under my fingertips as I downloaded the footage. Even the bitterness of my morning coffee couldn't hide the grin spreading across my face, as I watched Veronica literally dig herself into deeper legal trouble. I sent the video to Tom Martinez, who nearly spit out his coffee laughing. "She's just handed us criminal trespass, attempted fraud, and conspiracy to file false reports," he said. "This woman is building our case for us." That afternoon, Jimmy Kowalski delivered the original permits along with photos documenting the workshop construction and a sworn statement confirming it met every 1983 code. Meanwhile, Dolores passed along fresh intel. Veronica had been leaning on Roscoe at the hardware store, trying to bully him into refusing service to problem neighbors, meaning anyone who didn't bend to her agenda. "She's unraveling," Dolores remarked, watching from her window as Veronica drove slowly past my cabin for the third time that day. Desperate people do reckless things. By Friday, Harold had officially pulled the violation notice, citing incomplete information and the need for more review. Veronica's power play had collapsed spectacularly. Instead of scaring me into submission, she left behind a paper trail of harassment and handed me criminal evidence of trespassing. Still, I could sense her desperation mounting, and desperation makes people dangerous. The real battle was only beginning. 3 days after Harold withdrew the bogus citation, Veronica escalated. At 6:30 a.m., a process server knocked on my door, clipboard stacked with legal papers that turned my morning coffee to ash. Veronica Ashworth, Visha's Garrett Fletcher. Her lawsuit claimed my property had dragged down the entire neighborhood's value by $2 million. The accusations were wild, almost artistic in their invention. According to her complaint, I had created a hostile environment through intimidation and intentional neglect, supposedly undermining community standards. She wanted a temporary restraining order barring me from my own land, while the court weighed her claims. Her lawyer? Marcus Webb of Steinberg, Webb and Associates, the kind of firm that charges $500 an hour just to bully working people into compliance. Their letterhead probably cost more than my mortgage, but Veronica's desperation had pushed her into a massive blunder. I called Tom Martinez right away. After hearing the complaint, he said, "Bring me everything. Today, deeds, surveys, camera footage, financial records. This woman just opened the door for us to countersue." While I gathered paperwork, my buddy Rick from the construction crew started digging on his own. His cousin worked at a private investigation firm, and in blue-collar circles, family favors run deep. Rick's report came back fast. "Your HOA queen is drowning in debt. Bankruptcy filing shows $180,000 in credit. Cards, plus her mortgage is already in default. She's 3 months from losing it all." The puzzle pieces began locking together. Veronica wasn't simply power-hungry, she was broke and desperate. This crusade against longtime residents wasn't about neighborhood standards. It was about survival. And then Rick's cousin found something even bigger. A development outfit called Lakeshore Properties had been quietly buying up distressed houses around the lake. 3 foreclosures in just the past year, all through shell companies tied back to them. "Here's the kicker," Rick said. "Lakeshore calls it community optimization. They move into established neighborhoods, partner with HOAs to hound old residents, and then scoop up properties cheap once people can't handle the legal pressure." I remembered what my grandfather always said about cracked foundations. Where you see one fracture, more are hiding underneath. You've got to dig to find them. That evening, as I pored over documents in my kitchen, Tom called with news that nearly made me choke on my sandwich. His voice buzzed with excitement. "Garrett, you're not going to believe this. I checked your HOA's incorporation status, and we've got a huge problem for them." Turns out the Willowbrook Homeowners Association had never been legally incorporated. The 2019 filing had been rejected by the Secretary of State for missing signatures and incomplete forms. Veronica never fixed it. Every fine she issued, every fee she collected, every enforcement action, 3 years' worth, was legally worthless. An unincorporated HOA had no more power than a book club. She's been raking in money and issuing penalties with no authority at all, Tom explained. That's not overreach. That's fraud. The weight of it hit me like a load of cinder blocks dumped off a truck. 47 families had paid illegal fees averaging $200 apiece. Veronica had pocketed nearly $500,000 with zero legal right. Some, like the Kowalskis, even borrowed against their homes to cover her fabricated fines. The stress alone had made people sick. Mrs. Patterson began suffering panic attacks after months of relentless harassment over her rose garden. But what ultimately sealed Veronica's downfall was something else. Tom uncovered documents showing she'd been misusing the HOA credit card for her own lifestyle, spa visits, vacation rentals, car payments, all paid for with money neighbors. That was going toward legitimate community dues. This isn't just civil fraud anymore, Tom warned. We're looking at criminal charges here: wire fraud, racketeering, embezzlement, the whole spectrum. I pressed my palms against the cool, sturdy surface of my grandfather's kitchen table as the enormity of Veronica's crimes sank in. She hadn't merely singled out my family, she'd been draining the entire neighborhood for years. That evening, I sat on the porch of the cabin listening to the mournful cries of loons echoing across the black water like voices from another time. The sharp October air carried the mingled scent of wood smoke and damp leaves, grounding me in the moment. My grandfather always said bullies thrive on silence and fear, but every now and then one chooses the wrong target at exactly the wrong moment when their carefully stacked lies are already teetering. Veronica thought she was sparring with one stubborn construction worker over a patch of lakefront property. In truth, she was about to face an entire community, about to discover their trusted leader had been robbing them blind. The real fight was just beginning. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday morning when Tom Martinez called, his voice tight with the kind of thrill lawyers get when they found the smoking gun. "Garrett, you'd better sit down," he said. "My paralegal just finished combing through your HOA's financials, and what we found is going to blow this case wide open. I was halfway through installing gutters on a client's house, but I climbed down the ladder and ducked behind my truck for privacy. A metallic tang of anticipation filled my mouth as I braced for the news. Your HOA collected $430,000 over the past 3 years, Tom began. But here's the kicker. Only $180,000 is still in the account. Nearly a quarter of $1 million is gone. The numbers hit me like a hammer to the chest. This wasn't sloppy bookkeeping or a little skimming. This was large-scale, calculated theft. "Where did it go?" I asked, though deep down I already knew. Veronica's personal accounts show deposits lining up perfectly with HOA withdrawals, Tom confirmed. Wire transfers, cashier's checks, even direct deposits disguised as consulting fees. She's been treating the community fund like her own ATM, but the money trail was only the beginning. Tom's deeper digging exposed the true scheme fueling Veronica's campaign of harassment. Remember that development company Rick mentioned? Lakeshore Properties wired Veronica $50,000 just last month as a so-called liaison fee, Tom said. The records show it hit her account 2 days after she escalated enforcement against you and 3 other lakefront families. Suddenly, Veronica's plans snapped into focus with gut-wrenching clarity. Lakeshore specialized in what they called community optimization, which was really a euphemism for partnering with corrupt HOA boards to drive longtime residents out. Families who couldn't survive endless legal battles were bullied into selling cheap. Then Lakeshore swooped in with bargain offers, later flipping those homes for staggering profits. They've pulled this off in 3 other counties, Tom explained. Same pattern every time. Fake violations, families crushed under legal costs, properties sold for pennies, then flipped for millions. My grandfather's cabin wasn't the real prize. It was one piece in a larger blueprint. Lakeshore needed 3 particular lakefront parcels to complete a luxury resort plan. The payoff, $15 million in profit once they controlled the shoreline. Veronica's promised slice, $500,000, enough to erase her debts and vanish before anyone caught on. But she got greedy, Tom continued, shuffling papers in the background. She's been filing fake incorporation papers, pretending to have authority she never legally held. Every one of those filings adds to the pile of fraud charges. The scope of her crimes was staggering. Over 3 years, 47 families had been systematically bled dry. Elderly residents, like Ed Kowalski down the road, had taken out loans against their homes just to pay fabricated fines. The pressure had sent 2 neighbors with heart conditions to the hospital. Some families had already buckled under the weight. The Morrison cottage, sold last year for half its worth, turned out to be bought by a lakeshore shell company. The sellers never knew they'd been manipulated into financial ruin by their own HOA president. "This isn't about your cabin anymore, Garrett," Tom said quietly. "This is about shielding an entire community from organized crime masquerading as civic leadership." The sharp October wind tore through the construction site as Tom laid out the plan. Criminal referrals would go to the district attorney. Federal charges were coming for wire fraud and racketeering. Court orders would freeze her assets to claw back the stolen funds. But above all, the truth was going to be made public. Every homeowner deserved to know that the woman they trusted to protect the neighborhood had betrayed them. Veronica thought she was masterminding an elaborate real estate scheme. What she was really doing was building the very case that would land her in federal prison. Soon, the entire community would discover what their HOA president had been secretly doing with their money. Tom Martinez's law office quickly turned into our command center. The long conference table vanished under mountains of financial ledgers, property records, and evidence files, documents that looked like they belonged in a federal case file, which in reality is exactly what this was becoming. "We have to manage 3 fronts at once," Tom said, unrolling a timeline across the polished wood. "Criminal prosecution, civil recovery, and community defense. If we get this right, we shut down Veronica's scam and claw back every dollar she stole." The first call went to District Attorney Sarah Butler, a prosecutor well known for her work on white-collar crime. Tom had teamed up with her before on HOA fraud cases. Apparently, corrupt boards were spreading like wildfire across the state. 4. $130,000 in theft, coordinated harassment, collusion with developers, Tom summarized during the call, plus federal wire fraud for mail and electronic transfers. This is exactly the kind of case that needs to set an example. Butler agreed to fast-track the investigation. Within 2 days, forensic accountants would be digging through every HOA transaction from the past 5 years. While Tom advanced the legal battle, I began building the community response. My first stop was the VFW Hall, where my grandfather's old army buddies still met every Thursday. These men had faced real combat. Suburban threats didn't scare them. "Fletcher's grandson needs some backup with a neighborhood issue," announced Roy Patterson, my grandfather's foxhole partner from Korea. The chatter died instantly as I laid out Veronica's scheme. By the time I finished, 23 veterans had volunteered for security patrols and documentation. Retired soldiers, it turns out, are natural intelligence gatherers, perfectly suited for exposing HOA corruption. Dolores quickly emerged as our de facto community organizer. Years as a school principal had taught her how to manage large groups and keep impeccable records. More importantly, she was universally trusted by the neighbors. "I've been cataloging Veronica's harassment for months," she said, pulling open a filing cabinet that looked more like FBI storage. Photos, recordings, threatening letters, fraudulent bills, all neatly dated and tied to victims. The scale of abuse was staggering. 47 families targeted over 3 years. The average household had been extorted for $3,200. Some elderly residents had paid over $10,000 in bogus fines. Rick's cousin, a private investigator, supplied the technical edge we needed: professional surveillance equipment, financial tracking, tools, and most importantly, contacts in law enforcement specializing in organized fraud. "Your HOA president made a fatal error," I've explained PI Tony Martinez, no relation to our attorney. "She got sloppy with digital security. Every fraudulent transaction leaves an electronic trail, and those trails don't disappear." The evidence was ironclad. What we lacked was a strategy to unleash it. Random accusations wouldn't cut it. We needed a coordinated strike that protected the neighborhood and blocked retaliation. Our plan crystallized around 3 pillars: legal action, public exposure, and community mobilization. Tom would move immediately to freeze HOA accounts, locking Veronica out of whatever funds hadn't yet vanished. The stolen assets could then be seized through criminal forfeiture. I remembered a story about a contractor who fought City Hall corruption the same way, by meticulously documenting every detail and rallying the community until the cover-ups collapsed. The key was unstoppable momentum, evidence and public support so overwhelming that no one could bury it. When it came to media strategy, we reached out to Janet Walsh at the local paper. She wasn't related to the county commissioner, and she definitely wasn't tied to Veronica's country club circle. Janet was an investigative journalist with a track record of award-winning exposés on municipal corruption. After reviewing our evidence, she told us, "This is exactly the kind of story people need to see. HOA fraud is happening everywhere, but most don't know how to fight it. Your case could give families across the state a way forward." We lined up a coordinated media rollout, a front-page newspaper article, a TV interview, and a social media push, all hitting at the same time. The plan was to generate so much public attention that Veronica wouldn't have the chance to intimidate witnesses or destroy records. But the most critical part was rebuilding community trust. 47 families had been victimized, isolated, and made to feel powerless. We had to unite them and prove they weren't alone. That's when Mackenzie proposed the perfect idea: a community veterans memorial garden right on the disputed property line. Instead of endless battles over boundaries, we'd create a lasting tribute to local veterans while cementing shared community ownership of the land. "Grandpa Fletcher would love this," she said, sketching designs filled with native plants and engraved memorial stones. "He always said the best way to beat bullies is to build something better than what they're trying to tear down." The Memorial Garden project gave us legitimate grounds for meetings, volunteer organizing, and media attention. More importantly, it shifted the story from angry neighbors clashing with the HOA to a united community honoring veterans while rooting out corruption. By Friday afternoon, our coalition had grown to include 23 veterans, 47 victim families, 3 local lawyers, 2 private investigators, the district attorney's office, and 1 determined 16-year-old with drafting skills. Veronica thought she was up against 1 stubborn construction worker. Instead, she was about to face an entire community armed with evidence, legal muscle, and a just cause. The countdown to justice had begun. Her desperation became obvious once she realized her carefully built scam was collapsing faster than a flimsy roof in a storm. Monday morning, she posted an emergency notice claiming the HOA was being dissolved for administrative restructuring. Translation: she was trying to snatch whatever cash was left and vanish before charges hit. But Tom Martinez saw it coming. By noon, we had a court order freezing every HOA bank account and blocking all transfers. Veronica's escape plan was dead on arrival. That's when she switched from financial fraud to personal attacks. Tuesday evening, I came home from a job site to find Carl waiting in my driveway, his expression as grim as a funeral director's. "Garrett, you need to see this," he said, handing me a flyer that made my blood pressure spike. They'd been plastered on every car windshield at the grocery store. The handout showed a grainy photo of my cabin with the headline in bold, "Dangerous Neighbor Alert." According to Veronica's anonymous smear campaign, I was an unstable man with a violent history, posing a threat to community safety. The lies were astonishing. She claimed I had an assault record, completely false, stored suspicious chemicals in my workshop, apparently wood stain and motor oil counted, and had made terroristic threats against HOA board members, all because I demanded they follow the law. But her smear effort blew up in her face when she tried bribing witnesses. Wednesday morning, Dolores came to my door with news that nearly made me laugh. "She offered me $3,000, Dolores whispered, glancing around like we were trading state secrets. "Wanted me to sign a statement saying you harassed elderly neighbors and made threatening calls." Fortunately, Dolores had recorded the whole conversation on her phone. Veronica's voice was crystal clear, offering cash for fabricated testimony. "And here's the stupid part," Dolores added. "She tried the same thing with 5 other neighbors. We compared notes. She's promised a total of $15,000 she doesn't even have, just to invent crimes that never happened. Meanwhile, our security cameras were documenting her spiraling behavior. On Thursday alone, she drove past my cabin 17 times, sometimes snapping photos, other times sitting in her BMW just staring like she was plotting something. At 2:47 a.m. Friday morning, she finally cracked. I woke to the sharp sound of shattering glass and the stinging smell of spray paint. My security system roared to life, motion detectors blazing across the property. Every moment was captured on infrared cameras, clear as daylight. Veronica showed up in dark clothes, spraying the word "foreclosed" in giant red letters across my grandfather's workshop wall. She'd already smashed a pair of windows and tossed what looked like drug gear near the entrance. The scheme was obvious and sloppy: stage a fake drug scene, phone in a tip, and let the cops storm the property so she could claim she'd been right about her dangerous neighbor all along. But Veronica slipped up in one critical way. She never cut the security. Cameras. Every move she made was captured from 3 separate angles, including clear shots of her face when she looked straight into the lens. I dialed 911 immediately, then called Tom Martinez, followed by Deputy Mike Harrison, who had been keeping tabs on the case ever since our complaint was filed. "This woman just escalated from fraud to breaking and entering," Harrison said, after reviewing the footage in my kitchen while Veronica sat cuffed in the back of his cruiser. Add in vandalism, evidence planting, and filing false police reports, she's staring down multiple felonies. The fake drug evidence was especially idiotic. Empty baggies and a crack pipe carrying Veronica's own fingerprints. Even without the surveillance videos, the physical trail would have pointed straight at her. By sunrise Friday, word of her arrest was circulating through town faster than gossip at Sunday service. The local paper plastered the front page with the headline, "HOA President Arrested for Harassment Campaign." Janet Walsh's reporting dug deeper, uncovering even uglier truths. Veronica had pulled the same scams in other states. She'd been sued for HOA fraud in Arizona, and in California, her law license had been suspended over trust account violations. The so-called leader who bullied our town with legal threats was, in reality, a career con artist running small-town scams. But even with felony charges hanging over her, Veronica wasn't finished. People with nothing left to lose become volatile, and she still had allies eager to fight back. The battle wasn't over. It was only heating up. Her arrest should have ended the nightmare. Instead, within 12 hours of booking, she'd made bail through a bondsman tied to Lakeshore Properties and brought in Blackstone Crisis Management, a reputation laundering outfit that charges $50,000 to bury scandals. Their counterattack hit hard and fast. By Monday, anonymous robocalls blanketed 3 zip codes, a robotic voice insisting I was the real criminal, accusing me of trying to seize community assets through lies. The calls urged neighbors to learn the truth about Garrett Fletcher's violent past and supposed drug ties. At the same time, fake social media accounts churned out lies nonstop. Professionally designed graphics showed doctored photos of my cabin, captioned with nonsense about meth labs and terrorist plots. My construction business's Yelp page was buried under 1-star reviews, accusing me of theft, threats, and shoddy, unsafe work. But then they crossed the line. They went after my daughter. On Tuesday, Mackenzie came home from school sobbing, clutching a letter from the principal. Someone had reported to the district that I was mentally unstable, keeping chemicals and weapons around a child, and that Mackenzie was neglected and frequently absent. Pure lies, crafted to trigger Child Protective Services. The taste of rage filled my mouth as I read that letter. Attacking me was one thing, but targeting my 16-year-old daughter was unforgivable. That was the moment our community coalition went to war. Within hours, Roy Patterson's veteran network had tracked down Blackstone's local operation, just a rented office above the pizza shop downtown, staffed by college kids earning $20 an hour to make robocalls and write fake reviews. "These mercenaries think they can intimidate a town with combat vets in it," Roy growled, his hands steady as a sniper's while organizing surveillance shifts. "They're about to see what real resistance looks like." Meanwhile, Dolores rallied teachers, parents, and school board members, Principal Morrison received 47 calls in a single day from respected locals vouching for my integrity and Mackenzie's well-being. "That girl's one of our top students," Morrison said during our meeting. "Honor roll, tutoring, perfect attendance, except for legitimate reasons. Whoever made these claims was either misinformed or deliberately lying." CPS wrapped the investigation in under 2 hours. Social worker Amanda Rodriguez toured our clean, orderly cabin, reviewed Mackenzie's stellar academic record, and spoke with 3 longtime neighbors. "Mr. Fletcher, this was a malicious report meant to harass your family," she concluded. "We're closing the case immediately and flagging it as fraudulent." The real breakthrough came when Tom Martinez's forensic accountant uncovered Veronica's offshore scheme. Hidden inside a Caribbean shell company called Community Solutions LLC was $380,000, almost every dollar siphoned from HOA residents over the last 3 years. The transfers had been broken into small amounts to avoid reporting laws. Classic laundering. "She's been building this escape plan for months," Tom said as we studied the records in his office. Shell companies, offshore accounts, structured transfers. This wasn't some petty fraud. It's organized crime. Better still, the IRS was already watching Community Solutions LLC for suspicious activity. Veronica was no longer just facing state charges. Now it was federal tax evasion, money laundering, and racketeering, serious crimes with mandatory prison time. By Thursday, Blackstone had quietly cut ties. They dealt with PR disasters, not hardened criminals staring down decades behind bars. Still, Veronica made one last desperate move that Friday. She called Tom directly, offering to return half the stolen funds in exchange for lighter charges and a sealed plea deal that would hide her crimes from the public. She wants 50% restitution, minimum security time, and a gag order, Tom told me over the phone. The proposal was insulting, asking victims to eat half their losses just to protect her reputation, but it also showed how frantic she'd become. "What did you tell her?" I asked. "That she'll answer for every charge, return every cent, and do it in full view of the people she betrayed," Tom replied. "Some crimes are too big for secret bargains." As Friday night settled over Willowbrook, the call of loons drifted across the lake. Tomorrow's town hall would bring everything into the open. After months of lies, threats, and harassment, justice was finally coming, and Veronica Ashworth was about to learn what happens when small-town neighbors fight back. Saturday dawned crisp and clear, the kind of autumn morning that makes you grateful to live in small-town America. By 9 a.m., cars were already lined outside the Willowbrook Community Center. By 10:30, the parking lot resembled a county fair. The center hadn't seen a turnout this size since the high school's state championship back in '98. Every seat was taken, with people packed shoulder to shoulder along the walls. Local reporters set up cameras in the back, while state TV crews claimed space near the front. At the head table sat District Attorney Sarah Butler, Deputy Mike Harrison, and FBI agent Rebecca Torres, her presence alone rippling whispers through the room. When federal agents show up in a small town, everyone knows the crimes are serious. Veronica showed up 20 minutes late with her only remaining lawyer, Marcus Webb, who looked like he'd rather be handling tax audits than defending. A collapsing con artist. She had swapped her sharp power suit for a plain navy dress, her hands trembling as she clutched a thick folder of frantic, last-minute motions. Tom Martinez rose to speak, his voice cutting through the crowd's restless hum. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're here today because your HOA president has been defrauding this community for over 3 years, he began, as a projection screen lowered behind him. What you're about to see will both shock you and explain why fees kept rising while services disappeared. The first slide appeared. Veronica's banking records. $430,000 collected. Only $180,000 left in the HOA accounts. Gasps rippled through the hall as the full extent of the theft finally came to light. From the front row, Mrs. Patterson, seated with her oxygen tank, whispered loudly enough for all to hear. "Oh, my lord!" "Where did the stolen money end up?" Tom pressed, advancing to the next slide. There it was. Veronica Ashworth's personal spending. Bank deposits, credit card bills, spa visits, luxury vacation rentals, and even a $50,000 payout from Lakeshore. properties for bogus services unrelated to community improvements, the murmurs turned into heated grumbling as it dawned on neighbors that their hard-earned dues had funded Veronica's lavish lifestyle while they struggled financially themselves. But the true shock came when Tom played security footage from my own property. "This," he announced, "is your HOA president at 2:47 a.m. last Friday, spray painting 'foreclosed' on a residence home and planting drug paraphernalia to frame an innocent family." The crystal-clear video left no room for doubt. The room exploded. Shouts of "criminal" and "lock her up" filled the air as Veronica sat paralyzed, forced to watch her midnight sabotage projected for all to see. That's when elderly Ed Kowalski, leaning heavily on his walker, rose to speak. "This woman made me mortgage my home just to pay fake fines," he said, voice quivering with anger. "I lived here peacefully for 32 years until she came along and told me my American flag wasn't allowed and my shed needed $20,000 worth of permits." One by one, victims rose to share their stories. The Morrisons driven to sell their cottage after relentless harassment. Young parents forced to dip into retirement savings to pay trumped-up violations. Seniors hospitalized with stress-induced heart issues. 47 families, over $400,000 stolen. 3 years of systematic abuse disguised as civic responsibility. Finally, Veronica tried to speak, her voice barely audible over the crowd's fury. "These are all misunderstandings." But District Attorney Butler cut her off. "Mrs. Ashworth, you have the right to remain silent. I strongly suggest you use it." Turning to address the community, Butler continued, "Based on evidence collected over the past 2 weeks, we are filing 23 felony charges against Veronica Ashworth, including grand theft, fraud, racketeering, money laundering, and conspiracy." The room erupted into thunderous applause lasting nearly 5 minutes. Then FBI agent Torres stepped forward. "Mrs. Ashworth also used interstate wire transfers and mail fraud to conceal funds. Federal charges will add mandatory minimum sentences of 5 to 10 years in prison. Yet the most powerful moment came not from officials, but from Roy Patterson, my grandfather's old army buddy." He rose, holding a folded American flag. "Fletcher's grandson didn't just defend his own property," Roy declared, his voice carrying 6 decades of authority. "He fought for every family here. That's what true Americans do. Protect one another from abuse of power." He handed me the flag, flown over the state capitol in honor of local veterans. "Your grandfather would be proud, son. You didn't just guard his land. You carried on his values." The standing ovation that followed lasted 10 minutes. For the first time in years, neighbors felt safe to speak. Families realized they hadn't been alone. Veronica Ashworth sat in silence, watching her empire of lies crumble in front of 300 witnesses and 4 news cameras. Justice had finally arrived in Willowbrook, with a small-town punch. 6 months later, the sound of a gavel echoed in federal court as Veronica Ashworth was sentenced to 5 years in prison and ordered to pay $2.8 million in restitution, including punitive damages to ensure every victim was repaid, and then some. "Mrs. Ashworth," Judge Morrison declared, "you violated the sacred trust a community places in its leaders. Your calculated fraud represents the worst abuse of authority. Every stolen dollar was recovered through asset forfeiture, even funds she had hidden in Caribbean accounts she thought untouchable. Residents received full refunds with 18% interest, transforming lives overnight. Ed Kowalski paid off his emergency mortgage." The Pattersons finally took their first vacation in 5 years, but the true change wasn't just financial. On Veterans Day, more than 500 people gathered for the dedication of our new memorial garden. Governor Patricia Williams spoke about ordinary citizens showing extraordinary courage. The air smelled of apple cider and fresh donuts as 3 generations of veterans stood in formation. The garden exceeded every dream Mackenzie had ever sketched. Native flowers, granite stones for local veterans, and a central monument etched. With Fletcher's words, "This is our forever home. Nobody can take what you build with your own sweat." Watching my daughter lay flowers at Grandpa's stone, the polished granite warm beneath autumn sun, I felt something I hadn't in months of legal battles. Peace. The ripple effect spread beyond Willowbrook. Our case became a statewide model. Attorney General Martinez launched a task force that investigated 200 HOAs, recovering millions. 3 more schemes in nearby counties were exposed, saving countless families. Law schools now teach the Willowbrook model as a grassroots legal victory. Mackenzie's college essay about fighting corruption through community organizing earned her 12 acceptance letters and $84,000 in scholarships. She chose State University's pre-law program. "I want to help people fight back like Dad did," she said, "but with the right paperwork from the start. Even my relationship with my ex-wife healed in surprising ways. I always wondered if you'd fight for something bigger than yourself," she admitted. "Now I know the answer." The new Willowbrook Association now focuses on real community projects, playground upgrades, scholarships, and an annual festival that draws visitors from 3 counties. Property values rose 15% after news outlets highlighted our resilience. Tom Martinez launched a statewide property rights education program using our story as a blueprint. We've consulted on dozens of battles, helping other neighborhoods spot fraud and unite. Filmmaker Sarah Butler even won a regional Emmy for Small Town Justice, our story on screen, proof that grassroots democracy still works. And last month, the final piece fell into place. Lakeshore Properties was indicted on federal racketeering charges, exposing a multi-state criminal enterprise. Our little fight had helped unravel a nationwide scheme. As for me, healing came slowly but surely. Every sunrise, I rest my hands on the porch railings Fletcher built and sip coffee as golden light reflects across the lake. The loons call, the water stays calm, and peace finally feels permanent. This morning, a family from Tennessee called after receiving HOA harassment. After an hour of sharing everything we'd learned, they felt ready to stand up for themselves. Helping others makes every hardship worthwhile. Every victory against corruption strengthens democracy. Every united community makes bullies weaker. Fletcher's grandson didn't just defend his grandfather's land. He helped shield families across the country. And with every sip of morning coffee, satisfaction never fades because ordinary people can spark extraordinary change when they refuse to be silent. Now it's your turn. Share your HOA horror story in the comments. What would you have done differently? Have you checked your association's incorporation status lately? Your experience might help another family fight back. Subscribe for more HOA stories. We're building a community of people who refuse to let corrupt boards steal homes and dreams, because honoring the past sometimes means fighting for the future. Remember, corruption only wins when good people stay quiet. Your voice matters. You've been watching HOA Stories, where entitled Karens Get Their Reality Check. If this episode gave you secondhand rage or satisfaction, smash that like drop. Your take in the comments and subscribe so you don't miss the next round of HOA chaos.